Hi, guys. So, what we're going to talk about today is estimation with products. So, we're going to be looking at multiplication problems and we're going to be trying to find an estimate when I multiply it out. Estimates are really great when we don't need an exact answer. We just need kind of a ballpark. We need an around answer. So, before we can talk about how to do an estimation, we have to talk about rounding because rounding is kind of the entire concept of estimation. So if I am rounding a number, the number that I'm rounding gets controlled by the number to the right. There's a simple rule to remember when rounding. If the number to the right is between 0 and 4, the number that I'm rounding is going to stay the same. If the number to the right is between 5 and 9, it's going to make the number that I round go up by 1. And then whatever numbers are after the number that I'm rounding, they're gonna drop off and they become zeros. They aren't there anymore. So let's just practice rounding really quick before we get into our estimations. So let's say I have the number 37. If I'm trying to round this to the nearest 10, I'm going to be rounding the 3. But the 3 is not the one that's making the decisions here. It's the 7. The 7 controls what the 3 does. So I have to think, is the 7 between the 0 and the 4, or is the 7 between the 5 and 9? It's between 5 and 9. So that's going to make my 3, the number that I'm rounding, go up by 1. So when I'm rounding this to the nearest 10, this will become 40. In turn, let's say I have 12. And I want to round this to the nearest 10. I'm going to be rounding the 1, but the 2 makes my decisions. So if the 2 is between 0 and 4, the 1 stays the same. If it's between 5 and 9, it's going to go up by 1. The 2 is between 0 and 4, so my 1 stays the same. So this, when I round it, the 1 stays the same, the 2 becomes a 0. So it rounds to 10. A lot of times we use rounding and finding an estimation because we can do it in our heads once it's in a multiple 10. So now let's use this information about rounding to help us find the products of some answers by using estimation. So we're going to first start by multiplying a 2 by 1 problem. So let's do 46 times 5. We're not going to round the 5 because it's a 1 at this point, and we're focusing on rounding to the nearest tens. So I'm going to be rounding 46, but I'm rounding the 4. And I have to look to the right and see what the 6 does to the 4. Is the 6 between 0 and 4, or is the 6 between 5 and 9? The 6 is between 5 and 9, so that's going to make my 4 go up. The 4 becomes a 5, the 6 becomes a 0. I'm keeping the multiplying by 5. Now, I'm going to ignore this 0 for a second, and I'm only going to multiply my digits. 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. I'm going to bring that down to my answer. Now, I'm going to see how many zeros I have in my problem, and I have 1. Which means I'm going to have 1 0 in my product at the end. So the estimation of 46 times 5 is about 250. It's going to be a little bit less, but this is really close. So that's why we can use estimations to give us a general idea. Okay, so let's look at another example, and let's do a 2 by 2 number where we have a double digit on top and a double digit number on bottom. So let's look at 31 times 17. Okay, so I'm going to round both numbers now. Instead of just one, I'm going to round both, and I'm going to round them to the nearest tens. This 3 and this 1 are both going to get rounded. I need to look to the right to decide how I'm going to round. So the 31 is controlled by the 1. The 1 is between 0 and 4, so my 3 is going to stay the same. So this becomes 30 times, I'm going to use the 7 to control my 1. The 7 makes the 1 go up by 1 because it's between 5 and 9. So this becomes 20. I'm going to ignore my zeros for a minute, and I'm just going to do 3 times 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Now I'm going to see how many zeros I have in my problem, and I have 2, which means I need 2 zeros in my product. So I'm going to bring both zeros down and put it at the end of my number. So an estimation of 31 times 17 is approximately 600. Okay, so let's do one more example of this, but we're going to do a 3-digit by a 2-digit. Let's say this is going to be 112 times 56. I'm still only going to round this to the nearest 10 unless I'm told otherwise. So I'm going to be rounding my 1, and the 2 is going to control my 1. Is the 2 between 0 and 4, or is it between 5 and 9? It's between the 0 and 4. It's only going to affect the number in the tens place. It does not affect the number of my hundreds. So the number of my hundreds stays the same. I'm going to do it down here. The 1 is going to stay the same because the 2 is between 0 and 4. The 2 becomes a 0. Now I'm going to round 56. I'm going to round the 5, but it's controlled by the 6. Is the 6 between 0 and 4, or is 6 between 5 and 9? It's between 5 and 9, so it's going to make my 5 go up by 1. So this is going to become a 60. The 6 becomes a 0, the 5 becomes a 6. Now I can multiply. I am going to ignore my zeros, and I'm just going to multiply my digits that have a value of 1 or more. So 6 times 11 is 66. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 1 is 6. I'm going to count my zeros. I have 2 of them. So then my product is going to have 2 zeros at the end. So my estimation of 112 times 56 is 6,600. Okay, we're going to look at one more example, and this is going to be kind of a word problem. So let's imagine that Mary has 23 boxes of books. Each box has 136 books in it. Mary is needing an estimation of how many books she has in her collection. So because she doesn't need an exact number, I'm going to be able to estimate by rounding. And because I'm looking at boxes of books that each have 136 books, it's going to be a multiplication problem because it happens over and over again. Every box has the same amount of books. So I'm going to set this up as a multiplication problem. I'm going to put the one with the more digits on top. It doesn't really matter, but it just makes it easier on us. So I'm going to have 136 times 23. Because she doesn't need an exact answer, we're going to round, and we're going to round it to the nearest tens. So I'm going to round the 136 to the nearest tens. I'm going to round the 3. The 6 is the one doing the controlling. So it's the 6 between 0 and 4, or between 5 and 9. It's between 5 and 9, so it's going to make the 3 become a 4. The 1 does not change. So it becomes 140 because the 6 goes away. The 23 I'm going to round. The 3 is going to control the 2. Since the 3 is between 0 and 4, my 2 stays the same. So it becomes 140 times 20. Now I am going to multiply, ignoring my zeros. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. I'm going to count how many zeros I have in my problem. I have 2, and that's how many zeros are on my end of my product. So Mary has an estimated amount of 2,800 books. Okay, if you guys have any questions or you need additional information, please let me know in the comments, subscribe to my page, and like the post. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.